In 2023, 120,000 people from one of the oldest Christian communities in the world were kicked out of their ancestral homelands, and the world barely paid any attention. The Armenian Christians who were expelled from Nagorno Karabakh are pleading with us to pay attention now. The government of Azerbaijan is continuing its aggression, denying their history and mounting new threats. Will we listen? My name is Abi, and I'm your host here at the Christian Solidarity Podcast, where we stand as one with the body of Christ facing persecution around the world. At Christian Solidarity International, CSI, we partner with local Christian organizations to support religious freedom and human dignity for everyone. My role is in international advocacy, and my job title is a whole mouthful. I'm the Deputy Director of Public Policy and Communications. But I'm based in the US, and my work is to help make sure that followers of Christ, of all different traditions, can stand together with those facing persecution. In a 24/7 news cycle, it can be really overwhelming to even know where to begin. So we want to help you stay informed, give practically, pray consistently, and speak out to political leaders about the suffering happening in the world, with our hope always in Christ's ultimate redemption. Our partners are located in Syria, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, and more. You can find the full list online at our website at csi-int.org. But today, we're focusing on the critical threat that Armenians face from the government of Azerbaijan. We get to talk with a guest today who has firsthand insights from the conflict. Dr. Joel Veldkamp is our head of advocacy here at CSI. Hi, Joel.
Hi, Abby. Good to see you.
Good to see you, too. So Joel has his PhD in history from the Geneva Graduate Institute, as well as a master's degree in Middle Eastern Studies from the University of Chicago. He spent time in both Armenia and the ethnically Armenian Nagorno Karabakh territory. And he's really thoughtful, and he's a fantastic person to help us understand the conflict here. So Joel, thanks so much for talking with us today.
Thank you, Abby.
So we're going to dig into some weighty issues, but before we do, I wanted to ask you a weighty but a fun piece of trivia as a resident historian here at CSI. Are you ready?
Is this the surprise question?
This is your surprise question.
Oh, no. Okay. So I'm by definition, I'm not ready, but let's hear it.
Great. What's the oldest cathedral in the world?
The oldest cathedral in the world is the Holy See of the Armenian Apostolic Church in Etchmiadzin in Armenia.
Nice. You were ready. Yeah, and it's built in 301 to 303 AD by Gregory the Illuminator. And so this is the first country to become a Christian country. This is before even Constantine's conversion. And this building is older than St. Peter's Basilica, the original, or the Church of the Nativity. And for me, it's been really surprising and important this year to learn how central Armenian Christians are in our church history in terms of early stewards of the church and the gospel, and how little I know about their history. But you have visited both Armenia and Nagorno Karabakh. And so can you tell us a little bit about what really stood out to you the first time you visited?
I remember the first time I was in Armenia, I was on a bus tour with my fellow students. I was a student in Yerevan. I was trying to learn the Armenian language, not very successfully, I'm afraid. But the director of the program took us students on a bus to an archaeological site some hours outside of Yerevan. And it's a cave built into the side of a cliff face next to a river that carves a valley through the Armenian plateau. And inside this cave, they found evidence of human habitation from about 5,000 years ago. So quite old. They found what they say is the oldest pair of shoes in the world in this cave. They found some old wine, obviously no longer drinkable, but evidence that people were making wine in this spot 5,000 years ago. And I was standing in this cave, not really processing what I was seeing or where I was. And I remember I turned around and looked through the mouth of the cave back out into the sunlight. And I saw the river flowing there. And it all of a sudden hit me. Someone 5,000 years ago probably stood at the same spot and saw the exact same thing that I'm seeing right now. And it's one of those moments where you can feel like the world stopped turning almost, and you just realize the scope of human history and the scope of Armenian history. These are people who've been living in this land for longer than people have been writing history down.
Wow. Yeah, Yeah, that sounds really surreal and beautiful. And so just to help orient us a little bit, where is this region that you're talking about? Where is Armenia if someone's looking for it on a map?
This is in a region called the South Caucasus, and it's kind of wedged in between three bigger countries, between Turkey, between Russia, and between Iran. So Turkey and Iran are to the south, and then to the north there are two seas, the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. And in between those two seas is a little ridge of land that's really mountainous that we call the Caucasus. And that's where Armenia is, wedged in between Turkey, Azerbaijan, and another country called Georgia. So that's where you can find it on the map.
So let's start with the basics. What is it that happened in Nagorno Karabakh in 2023?
So in 2023, this region called Nagorno Karabakh, where 120,000 Armenian Christians were living, was subjected to a siege by the Azerbaijani military. There was one road that connected this region with the Republic of Armenia and through the Republic of Armenia to the rest of the world. And the Azerbaijani military cut that road. They set up a military checkpoint on that road. They didn't let anyone come in or out. And there really was no other way in or out of the territory. All around the territory, the Azerbaijani military was posted. So for 9 months, Nagorno-Karabakh was really cut off from the rest of the world. Very little food or medicine came in. From July 2023 on, really nothing came in. In July, Azerbaijan stopped the Red Cross from bringing supplies into Nagorno-Karabakh anymore. So from that time on, there was really no medicine, no fuel, no food coming into this region. People were just living on reserves and whatever they could grow in their gardens. And this was a really kind of a horrific time to be an advocate for Armenians and for Nagorno-Karabakh because we were just watching. And with my CSI colleagues on September 12, we actually went right up to the border. We went right up to the road that Azerbaijan had blocked. And we looked down into the valley and we could see Nagorno-Karabakh. And we could call our friends on the phone and talk to them. And they were an hour's drive away. And we couldn't do anything for them. We could hear how hungry they were. We could hear how tired they were. And we were just stuck. So Nagorno-Karabakh was in this limbo, in this state of siege for 9 months. And then on September 19, 2023, Azerbaijan launched a blitzkrieg. They attacked this tiny region from all directions. Nagorno-Karabakh did have its own army, but of course by that time everyone is hungry, everyone is tired. And after 24 hours of really brutal combat, the local authorities in Nagorno-Karabakh surrendered. Then there was a 4 or 5 day period where no one really knew what was going to happen. And it was quite terrifying because until then, every time Armenians had been caught behind Azerbaijani lines in the 2020 war, in the 2016 war, in the war during the 90s, these Armenians were killed, kidnapped, or expelled from their homes. So we were expecting massacres, really, and there were terrible rumors floating around, which were hard to control because Azerbaijan was blocking all the communications in the region. There was no internet access, there was no cell access. People couldn't even travel from one village to another. Soldiers were blocking all the roads. So everyone was just kind of hiding in their basements, not knowing what was going to happen next. And on September 25, finally it was announced that anyone who wanted to leave would be allowed to leave. And of course, there's no guarantee that if you didn't leave now, you would be able to leave later. The entire Armenian population fled for their lives, basically. Between September 25 and October 1st, 120,000 people left. Normally, this is a drive that takes about 2 hours to get from the capital of Nagorno-Karabakh to the border of Armenia. It took most people 2 days, some people 3 days to make that drive because the road was completely clogged with cars, people riding in pickup trucks, in open air cargo trucks, 6, 7, 8 family members in tiny little sedans. The Armenian government estimates that 64 people died just on that road from exposure, from thirst, from trauma, particularly, babies and older people or people with disabilities. So this was a very, very efficient ethnic cleansing, we can say. Azerbaijan's goal was to empty Nagorno-Karabakh of its entire population And it succeeded without having to resort to massacres or mass detentions. They basically created the conditions where it was impossible for these people to live in their homeland, and then offered them one escape hatch, and they took it.
And so you're describing it to us a bit, but what do you mean by this term ethnic cleansing? What is that?
Yeah, ethnic cleansing is when a government undertakes a program to get rid of a certain group of people from a region, usually a group of people with a certain ethnicity or racial background, like Armenians. And this is, we can say, part of how the nation-state system emerged in the Middle East and Eastern Europe was this idea that the state should represent a particular group of people. So anyone who doesn't belong to that group of people is kind of like a fly in the ointment or some dust in the gears. And depending on the government, they can resolve this problem with, autonomies. They can allow these minorities who don't belong to the main people group to govern themselves or to have some special rights, or they can just get rid of them all, kill them all, or expel them all from their homes. And we see that again and again in the history of the Middle East and of Eastern Europe from the late 19th century on. But in the Armenian case, it's part of a much longer story that we call the Armenian genocide process. Because many of our listeners may know, during World War I, from 1915 to 1923, the Islamic Ottoman Empire murdered almost 1.5 million Armenians. Now, that was ethnic cleansing on a whole nother scale. That was truly genocide. They were trying to kill an entire group of people. And what is today the Republic of Armenia and what was Nagorno Karabakh, those are the survivors. Those are the people who escaped the Ottoman genocide of 1915 to 1923. And they managed to carve out a country for themselves in spite of the mass violence directed against them. And now we're in a place where they're really in danger of losing that homeland altogether. So we see that the Armenian genocide process never really stopped. It's continuing. And the ethnic cleansing of Nagorno Karabakh is the latest phase.
You visited Karabakh before it fell, right?
Yeah. Yep. In 2017, I went there as a student.
What did you hear from the people there at that point? What were they expecting or fearing?
At that point, it was a very different time. In 2020, the conflict truly reignited after being frozen for 25 years. This is when Azerbaijan launched a huge attack on Nagorno Karabakh and thousands of people were killed. But in 2017, that wasn't really on people's radar yet. And there had been lots of economic growth and investment in Nagorno Karabakh. So it felt like when you were in the capital city of Stepanakert, it felt like a very modern place. It felt like, very nice facilities, very nice infrastructure. And I noticed the people there were a lot more friendly than in Yerevan. Nothing against Yerevan. I love Yerevan, but Yerevan is a capital city. It's a big city. It's kind of like the New York of Armenia. And Nagorno Karabakh was just completely different. People were relaxed. People were in the place where they had been living for thousands of years. And you could just really feel that sense of peace, I think.
Yeah, that's such a radical change to see I'm sure from your perspective, to see the before and the after of this conflict really picking up. And then of the emptiness now, right? The expulsion of all the inhabitants.
Yeah, and we should underline this. Basically, nobody lives in Nagorno Karabakh right now. There have been various efforts by the Azerbaijani government to settle Azerbaijanis in these lands, but they haven't really gotten underway yet. And you can imagine it's quite difficult when the entire productive population of a place is gone to just start from scratch. So Karabakh is a land of ghosts. There's nobody there.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So let's talk about this event in Switzerland that happened in Bern recently. So why did CSI co-organize the Swiss Peace Initiative, as they're calling it?
Yeah. So this is a development that has happened in Switzerland that was quite unexpected. At least I wasn't expecting it. But Switzerland, this little country in the middle of Europe with a strong tradition of neutrality and human rights and humanitarianism, has become the country that has gone farther than any other country in the world to support the right of return of Armenians to their homeland in Nagorno Karabakh. The Swiss parliament in March passed a motion that requires the Swiss government to hold within 1 year a peace conference between the government of Azerbaijan and the representatives of the people of Nagorno Karabakh to discuss how the right of return should be implemented. The International Court of Justice has ruled that the Armenians have the right to return to their homeland. This is a very clear right under international law. Azerbaijan is denying that right for the moment, but the Swiss parliament has now required the Swiss government to organize a peace conference where this right will be discussed by the people who it applies to. And that is really something that no other government has been willing to do. And if I can set the stage here a little bit.
Yeah, please.
The Western world is quite eager to forget about Nagorno Karabakh. That might sound like a strong statement, but I think it's quite clear. The priority of the United States and the European Union and their allies is to have a peace treaty between the Republic of Armenia and the Republic of Azerbaijan. In their view, this is a way to bring stability to the region, to open up the region to Western investment, and maybe even to bring Armenia and Azerbaijan into the Western alliance against Russia. And in the view of Western policymakers, Nagorno-Karabakh was the biggest obstacle to this peace treaty between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And some American officials have said out loud, now that Nagorno-Karabakh is gone, that is, now that 120,000 people have been expelled from their homeland, now it's easier. Now we can get moving. So this is important to underline because the Swiss peace initiative is different. The Swiss peace initiative is designed to hold a peace conference not between Armenia and Azerbaijan, but between Azerbaijan and the representatives of the people of Nagorno-Karabakh. In other words, the victims of the ethnic cleansing campaign. They themselves are meant to have a voice and meant to be represented at this peace conference. That is something that no other Western country wants to touch, especially the United States, and it's really, really significant that Switzerland is making this step.
Yeah, and so who else has been talking with the leaders of Nagorno-Karabakh in this time? How have they engaged or tried to engage, and what's been the response there?
Really no one. No one is talking to the leaders of Nagorno-Karabakh. We have to imagine the geopolitical situation here a bit. Azerbaijan is extremely rich. It's extremely militarily powerful. They're very well connected throughout the Western world. It's a bit quiet, but their influence is really in a lot of institutions and places. I'll tell you, Abi, I have been told by diplomats at the UN, where we have consultative status, that there's a lot of pressure on diplomatic delegations at the UN and on NGOs at the UN, not even to use the word Nagorno-Karabakh. They want to memory hole it, as George Orwell might say. They want to act as if it was never there. And
completely erasing the history.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but we have to underline the people of Nagorno-Karabakh themselves don't accept this. The people of Nagorno-Karabakh, or Artsakh, as they call it sometimes, which is really unfortunate for us English speakers because both of the names of this land are impossible for us to pronounce. But Artsakh, Nagorno-Karabakh, it's the same thing. The people of Artsakh, their parliament continues to meet in exile in Armenia. And they have not accepted the dissolution of their republic, a republic that was formed by a free vote of the people in 1991. They continue to insist that they are from Artsakh. The Armenian government is encouraging them to accept Armenian citizenship. Most of them haven't. Very, very few have actually taken Armenian citizenship and Armenian passports. They insist, we are from a country called Artsakh, and we're going back there, even though the odds against them are so high right now. So the parliament of Artsakh that continues to meet in exile has appointed a committee to campaign for their rights in different capitals in Europe and the United States. This committee is headed by the former foreign minister of Armenia, a man named Vartan Oskanian. We see our role as promoting this committee and promoting their mission wherever we can. So we brought them to the United Nations to speak. We brought them to the capital of Switzerland to speak. And we're going to continue to platform this committee because they are the legitimate representatives of these people who have been driven from their homeland.
So CSI's advocacy work didn't start with this event in Bern. CSI has been advocating around this issue for a long time, and you have delivered statements for CSI at the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. So, like I mentioned earlier, we think it's really important that this issue not be forgotten, precisely because there is so much pressure to forget it. There's so many people who have an interest in not talking about Nagorno Karabakh or Artsakh anymore. So for us, that makes it all the more important that we go to a place like the UN and we hammer away at Nagorno Karabakh and the right of these people to return to their homeland. Every three times a year, whenever the UN Human Rights Council has a session, we go there and we go to the floor and we make a statement about the people of Nagorno Karabakh forcibly displaced from their homeland and their right of return. And Azerbaijan does not like this one bit. So sometimes they will use their right of reply on the floor to attack us. They'll say that we're inciting religious hatred, which is a funny accusation because we never mention religion, or very rarely, on this issue. They'll say that we're funded by the Swiss government to attack Azerbaijan, which is not true at all. CSI takes no funding from any government as a matter of principle. But it's good to see that, we do get this reaction, because that means we're pushing them where it hurts. It's worth noting that Azerbaijan is undertaking a campaign really to erase Nagorno Karabakh. So according to state propaganda in Azerbaijan, none of the ancient churches in Nagorno Karabakh, some of which date to the 6th century, are actually Armenian. They're all from a different people group that disappeared centuries ago. They've said that the region of Nagorno Karabakh no longer exists. There's only a bigger region called the Karabakh Economic Zone. It's just a systematic effort to destroy churches, destroy cemeteries, destroy whole villages. And this is part of that at the UN, that they want to attack anyone who even uses the name Nagorno Karabakh. So that's all the more important for us than to go there and to keep talking about it.
Yeah. It's really important. So you have spoken to many displaced Armenians. What are they saying now?
Yeah, it's been a massive blow to them. This is a land where Armenians have been independent for thousands of years. Even during the days of the Islamic empires, it was always Armenian princes who were ruling Karabakh on behalf of the caliphs. Even during the long time when Nagorno Karabakh and Armenia and Azerbaijan were part of the Soviet Union, Nagorno Karabakh had autonomy officially. And in the 90s, the Armenians of Nagorno Karabakh fought for their freedom and they won it at a very high cost in lives. And now it's all gone. And that's really an enormous difficulty. So I have a friend from Nagorno Karabakh who's a very strong person who list of people who the Azerbaijanis were hunting, and he had to sneak out of Nagorno Karabakh during the evacuation so that he wouldn't be kidnapped. Just someone who's never intimidated, never backs down, never shies away from speaking the truth. But I saw him, break down at a public event because he was speaking about the graves of his mother and his father, which are in Nagorno Karabakh, which he can't visit anymore. It wasn't, the people who were hunting for him to kill him or to kidnap him. It wasn't the forced expulsion. It wasn't any of the other traumas he endured, but that thing was just too much. That was the thing that really made him emotional, that he had to leave his parents' graves behind. CSI has a good friend named Vardan Tadevosyan, who ran the only rehabilitation center in Nagorno Karabakh for, I want to say 25 years. And he poured his soul into the center, worked days and nights, and made it a place where everyone in the whole region who had disabilities, mental or physical, or who had wounds from the war could come and get treatment and dignity. And he had just finished making some final renovations to a new wing before the siege began. And all work is just lost to him. And he can hardly talk about it these days. It's just so painful. And when he does talk about it, he'll say things like, what was it all for? What did we all invest so much effort for? But one thing that keeps me going is that he has not given up. He is now building a new rehabilitation center in Armenia, not far from the capital of Yerevan. And this man, he hardly took a breath after being expelled from his home with all of his patients and all of his staff. He just got right back on the horse and he started building again. And when you know people like that, how can you say, well, we're done with this issue now, actually? It's impossible. As long as they are determined to return to their homeland, CSI is going to stand with them.
Yeah, that's powerful. Do you see there being a good chance that displaced Armenians will be able to return to their homes? What comes next from here? What does the landscape look like?
The landscape does not look good. We have to be honest about that. Azerbaijan has the military advantage, they have the economic advantage, and because precisely we're in a world that's really riven by superpower conflict right now. We have the US against Russia, we have China against the US, we have other powers like Turkey trying to make their own place in the region. That gives Azerbaijan an enormous amount of clout because everyone is competing for influence in this region. And when you're competing for influence in a region, you want the most powerful state in the region to be on your side. So everyone is giving Azerbaijan everything that it wants right now, basically. And so it's very difficult to imagine, if the Western world was going to act to save Nagorno Karabakh, they had 9 months to do it, right? They're certainly not going to exert themselves to do something that's much harder, which is to allow these people to go back to their homeland if they weren't willing to exert any energy at all to keep them from being expelled from their homeland. But the world is very unstable right now. If you hadn't noticed, things are changing.
Really?
Things are changing very quickly all the time. And I think both the United States and Russia are coming to realize that this conflict is not working out for either of them. Russia, it seems pretty clear, thought that they could conquer Ukraine in a few weeks, and then they would be the undisputed masters of Eastern Europe, and everyone would have to take them seriously again. That hasn't happened. The United States, it's very clear, thought that they could use Ukraine to just break Russia the way they used Afghanistan to break Russia in the 90s. That hasn't happened either. And we're seeing not that one side is moving towards victory. Instead, we're seeing that conflicts are proliferating in the world, whether you're talking about the Middle East, whether you're talking about Sudan, whether you're talking about India and Pakistan. So I think people are coming to realize that the US and Russia need to work together on some of these issues if we're going to have a peaceful and secure future. And if that happens, if there's real will in both Washington and Moscow to come to some sort of agreement, this is a place where they could work together. This is a place where they could uphold international law, uphold their traditional friendship with the people of Armenia, and build trust, and also bring Azerbaijan to heal a little bit, which is in both of their interests, to be frank. Secretary of State Marco Rubio testified a few weeks ago that he is scared that Azerbaijan is going to invade Armenia next. And from where I'm sitting, that's a very rational fear, seeing the rhetoric that the dictator of Azerbaijan uses about Armenia, calling it West Azerbaijan, broadcasting weather broadcasts for West Azerbaijan, where all the cities in Armenia are given Azerbaijani names. Extremely aggressive rhetoric. The fact that Azerbaijan is firing on Armenian border villages almost every day. I think the US has bitten off a little more than they can chew. I think they thought they could control this dictator, they could control Azerbaijan, that if you gave him just a little bit, then he would be happy. And that's not how it's turned out. In fact, he's become more aggressive and more unreliable. So it's not a sure thing by any means, but I would say the situation is more favorable to this sort of initiative from Switzerland today than it was 6 months ago or a year ago. So we see our mission as we have to push for this with everything that we've got. We're not in control of the world. We're not in control of major historical events. But if the events fall in a certain way, we want to be ready.
Yeah. And there is, like you're saying, I mean, things are shifting, things are in motion. And so it is important to be ready to take those opportunities when they come and to look for justice in the world around us and look for where there's opportunity both to reinforce the need to protect Armenia itself as a country and also to protect the people who were displaced from their homes in Nagorno Karabakh. So what can our listeners do to help?
I would say to our listeners, we're at the beginning of a very long journey, probably, for justice for the Armenian people. And I would say if you want to get involved, that's what CSI is for. So I'd encourage you to engage with us, to sign up for our newsletter, to follow us on social media. If you'd like to give to support some of the projects that we support in Armenia, if you feel so led, We'd be very honored to receive your gifts. We're supporting this new rehabilitation center outside of Yerevan. We're also supporting refugees from Nagorno Karabakh who need housing and who need new job opportunities in the land of exile. But we are going to be working on this issue for the foreseeable future, and we will keep you updated about what we're doing. And when you have opportunities to contact your lawmakers and say, hey, this matters to me, I want you to do the right thing for the people of Armenia. So I would say, come on this journey with us.
Yeah. Thank you, Joel.
Thank you, Abi.
Well, that's all for today's episode. To learn more, visit csi-int.org, where you can read about the Swiss Peace Initiative and learn about the ongoing issues surrounding Nagorno-Karabakh. You can also find out more about our advocacy and our direct on-the-ground aid, supporting Christians facing persecution all around the world. I'm Abi McDougal, and this is the Christian Solidarity Podcast. Thanks for listening.